Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the service. I hope you survived daylight savings time and are able to join us. Today's service will be a few minutes of meditation and then a Dharma talk by Salish Mahajan, and then chanting. But following the Dharma talk will be questions and answers. Thank you. Chandasara, will you do the meditation?
Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning to everybody. Now, shall we practice relaxation, breathing, relaxation, meditation, and then generate loving kindness thoughts. So to relax our mind and body, shall we sit in a comfortable upright posture, and then just gently breathe in and out. Observe the breathing as they naturally occur. Breathe in and out naturally and observe. Be mindful when we are breathing in. When we are breathing out, we are breathing out. Just be gentle. Breathe in and out gently for about 2 or 3 minutes. We breathe in and breathe out gently and mindfully. Now we cultivate loving kindness thoughts. Sukhino wa kemino honto sabbe satta bhavanto sukhitatta. May all the living beings, including me, be physically well. May all the living beings, including me, be safe. May all the living beings, including me, be mentally well. Let's continue spreading loving kindness thoughts in this way until we hear the bell sound. May all the living beings, including me, be physically well. May all the living beings, including me, be safe. May all the living beings, including me, be mentally well. Shall we repeat this mindfully?
Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Now we will have the Dharma talk. Salish, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
It's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, I want to thank Bhante Santi and the resident monks at International Buddhist Center for this opportunity to share some teachings of the Buddha. If you are joining after the first 3 sessions this year, we have been talking about one of the Pitaka, the teachings baskets of the Buddha. So far, we talked about, in the Abhidhamma, we talked about the importance of understanding of Dhamma, and also my purpose is to, in a way, demystify the teachings of the Buddha in Abhidhamma. It's very important that we know some of, at least attempt to understand some of the teachings there, because that will allow us to understand how meditation works, how our mind functions, and what kind of thoughts are unhealthy and worthy of condemnation, and what kind of thoughts are worthy of praise. So we talked about chitta within the consciousness categories. We discussed 12 types of unwholesome consciousness. And today we will look at a few remaining categories within the central world consciousness, and we'll focus on rootless consciousness today. And just to keep it easy to understand, and we will look at these consciousness from the functions. And if you are using the same textbook that I recommended, the Comprehensive Manual of Abhidhamma by the Bodhi, and also Milinda Panha, the questions of King Milinda, they will provide you a nice context to understand some of these concepts. Now, in 12 types of unwholesome consciousness, we saw that 8 of them are rooted in greed. And these 8 consciousness are never void of or never free from ignorance. So these 8 consciousness are always based on either with greed and also with ignorance. And the other 2 we talked were consciousness rooted in hatred. Now, again, the hatred-rooted consciousness are also never free from ignorance. Therefore, these 10 consciousness in unwholesome category we consider has 2 roots, right? The dominant one, which is either hatred or greed, and they all have ignorance as the base. And the last 2, which is based on delusion alone, it's so strong that it does not associate with any views. So it's devoid of view, but they're always strong root on delusion. And delusion comes in 2 categories. One is doubt, and the other one is restlessness. So we saw that these type of consciousness, they are considered 12 types of unwholesome. And when we say unwholesome, that by definition, it means it could cause harm to yourself, it could cause harm to others, or both. That's how we define unwholesome consciousness. And the opposite also true, an action or a word or a thought that would bring benefit to yourself, others, and both parties, we call them wholesome consciousness. Now, if you think of the remaining that we're going to talk today, that is 18 types of these rootless consciousness or chitta, rootless chitta. You will see 7 of them are results of unwholesome consciousness, and 8 of them are results of wholesome consciousness, and 3 of them are not associated with any root. So they are functional. So they don't have either wholesome or unwholesome to produce these consciousness. Now, to make it a little fun, now if you look at the 2 categories, you will see the unwholesome resultant rootless consciousness, a mouthful of word, has they are all originated, or not all, at least the first one, you think, look at the Pali, you will see upekka sagata chakku vinyana, upekka sagata sota, upekka sagata gahana, upekka sagata juha. So in Pali, that in English would be equanimity, associated with equanimity, the consciousness of eye, consciousness of ear, nose, tongue. And the bodily consciousness is always associated with dukkha, or and dukkha would be translated as unpleasure. All right. And then those are 5 associated with our 5 sensory faculties. And then we have equanimity-based receiving and equanimity-based investigating. So these are 2, sampati-channa and sampirana. And the other category, which is ahetuka kusala vipaka, that means rootless, wholesome, resultant consciousness in this category. They are, again, the first 4 associated with eye, ear, nose, tongue. They are associated with equanimity, and the bodily one, the bodily consciousness is always associated with pleasure. That's called somanassa. And there are 2 types of, and the next one is equanimity associated receiving, and the investigating has 2. One is associated with equanimity, the other one is associated with pleasure. Now, these are total of 16, total of 14, total of 15 here, 7 and 8. And then there are 3 functional that we will see. One is Panchadwara Vajjana, the 5-door adverting consciousness, and Manodwara Vajjana, mind-door adverting consciousness. And the last one is Hasitupada, the equanimous or neutral smiling. And we'll get to that. But instead of getting into these different categories, I want to talk this from the function of these consciousness. Now think of like when we try to understand the process of life, right? We talk about rebirth and how it is connected with these different type of results. Now I must tell you, even these consciousness are result of either unwholesome or wholesome consciousness. They are not wholesome or unwholesome by itself. The reason they are not wholesome or unwholesome makes it rootless. That means none of these consciousness have root or rooted on either hatred, desire, or delusion, or non-hatred, non-desire, or non-delusion. So they don't have its own potential. They're weak. That's why they cannot produce a karma, but they are a result of a karma. So the function of this consciousness itself cannot produce another karma. I hope that's clear. These are result of unwholesome, one of the consciousness category, but not going to produce another karma. Now, let's put this in a context and try to understand, how this process happened. Now, if you think of starting from the rebirth to death, we can see the life process within these not 17, but not 18 of these, but actually, and later we will see that in the miscellaneous compendium, there's a category called analysis of function. And there you will see how these consciousness play a role. Now, let's start from the time of rebirth. Now, we say it's a rebirth, but it's actually consciousness, which happened just once in one lifetime. Now, you don't have multiple, we call in Pali, it's called patisandhi. Now, the Pali term patisandhi means, pati means kind of a pre or before, sandhi means a connector. So the consciousness that connects between the past life and this life, we call patisandhi chitta, right? The consciousness of rebirth linking or rebirth linking consciousness. That's the term. Now think of our very first conception in our mother's womb. We were in a different realm, different world, and different lifestyle, but there is, now this will get interesting. That's how we talk about rebirth. We don't have a soul. So there is no way we can tell that the previous life, Sailesh, was someone else and he died, his soul traveled from that body to this new body, who is Sailesh now. No, that's not how it works. There is a undisrupted flow of consciousness. That's what we call stream of consciousness, right? There is no break in between. In Mahayana tradition, there is a term called a period of bhavanga that is like a in-between phrase, but that is not what we see in Theravada tradition in Abhidhamma. We see that there is a continuous flow of that consciousness. So think of the moment of rebirth, the starting of a life. It typically happens when there is a condition. Now, when I say condition, there should be a matter that can host a life, right? When there is a matter, that means the let's say fetus or some kind of a human or any other organism that is ready to receive a consciousness. And that's where, now, I can tell you from the Dhamma, but I'm not sure if I can tell you. And in Abhidhamma, there are some other places really makes clear when this happens. So in Patisambhidamagga, when you look at one of the categories in Khuddaka Nikaya, you find Sariputta, Bhante Sariputta explains the timeline. So after 4 to 6 weeks of conception, the kalala in the Pali, which is like a similar equivalent to fetus, is ready to host a life. And that's where this consciousness can connect with this new life. And that very first consciousness we call Patisandhi Chitta. And it's not going to last forever. It just lasts a one mind moment, just like any other consciousness, right? And if you ask me what is a mind moment, the best way to explain is if you know how quickly a matter dissolves. A matter has a lifespan. And if you think of the matter has a lifespan, if you equate the lifespan of a matter to a consciousness, that would be equivalent to 1 to 18 ratio. That means the mind can only last 1 of 18th lifespan of a matter. It's very short, very fast. And that's what we call mind moment, right? 1/18th of a matter life is one mind moment. And that's, I don't know if that is helpful, but the consciousness, this rebirth linking consciousness coming to this life, and it starts a new life. Now, that's how we talk about rebirth. We don't talk about soul, but imagine another analogy from Samyutta Nikaya, you find that, and also in Ratana Sutta, you find if you want to understand how this rebirth links, it's neither different, not the soul, not the onion. It's not different, not the same. Why? For example, if you take a candle light, it's ignited, and you light another candle with the flame. Now, what do you tell about the second flame? Is that a new flame, or is that the same flame? The answer would be, well, you cannot say it's a new flame because it was the effect of the first flame, right? The cause of the second flame is the first flame, but you cannot say it different because it has connection with the previous flame. So it's neither the same one because it's in the second candle, nor the different one because it is produced by the first flame. And that's a very loose analogy to explain how rebirth connects. But I hope you understand, when there is a proper condition for a life, just like the candle, the wax, and the twig, it helps to produce another flame. Same thing applies to a new life. So there should be proper condition to host a new life, and the transition from one life to next time is very soon. It just takes, similar to what we said, the mind moment. The last consciousness in previous lives would be Chuti-citta. The other term is like a death consciousness or the departing consciousness. That's the last consciousness in our previous life. As soon as that consciousness arises, it dies after producing a rebirth linking consciousness, which is Patisandhi Chitta. So there is no in-between gap. That's how consciousness continues. Now, once in this life, let's say we understood that part, the rebirth linking consciousness is there. Once that rebirth linking consciousness is there, it cannot survive more than one mind moment. So the rebirth linking consciousness will produce another consciousness, what we call life continuum, and the Pali term is bhavanga, right? There's a bhavanga chitta. Now, this life continuum consciousness will be present from the second of this patisandhi or life linking consciousness all the way to before the last consciousness, which is death consciousness or chuti chitta. So it continues to arise and pass away, arise and pass away throughout our life. Its job is to remain active, to keep us alive. That's how we know we are alive. This life, life continuum, that's the word sound, bhavanga. It's a body of being alive or existent. Existence will continue to be there as the intermediate connectors. Now that's where we will see. Now let's say somebody has this rebirth linking consciousness, then it arose, started a new life, and we will later talk about, what determines where do we go when we talk about karma. Now, Patisandhi Chitta has to be based on type of karma that we have done. That's what determines where we go. It's not our choice, at least up until the next consciousness starts. Well, what kind of karma you do is your choice, right? When do you do is your choice. Once the karma is in place, where do you go is based on the law of karma. And nobody governs that. Nobody's taking in charge of like, hey, let me assign the white guy and the black guy to a different category. No, it is just based on what kind of karma you have accumulated that determines our life. Now, when we talk about karma, we will enjoy discussing, karma is not deterministic in Buddhism. It has its own law, just like the consciousness had its own law. I think I mentioned that. If you ask me, how is this possible? But it's similar to the science of, the theory of gravity. Well, it's there. Nobody has seen gravity, but somebody has proved it. That's Newton, Isaac Newton, and it seems to work no matter where we go. It's hard to defy that law. Similar to that, the Buddha has talked about the law of mind, and that's what I'm talking here, using Buddha's law of mind, law of consciousness to explain this process of life. So coming back to our topic, once you have bhavanga, the life continuum consciousness, again, it will continue to stay fed by our previous karma. Now, when this consciousness is there, now we will come to what we're going to talk today is a rootless or ahetuka consciousness. Now, to put them together, they seem similar if you look at them. There are 5 related to 5 sense faculties, and there are 2, one related to mind door, advertent, and the other one is sensory door, like a panchadwara vajjana, advertent, and there is a receiving, and there is a investigating, and then later we will see that determining consciousness, vattapana consciousness, and then we will see how karma is produced based on our sensory experience, which is not part of this in this category ahetuka, but we call javana chitta. That javana chitta is like the karma producer. And after that, we will end with the chuti chitta or the death consciousness. Before that, there is a short lasting consciousness we call, in English, it would be registration, but in Pali, we call tadarambana. That means it continues to stay with that, whatever consciousness previously was experienced. Now bhavanga chitta, once it is there, it's almost like a dormant state. Whenever you are, let's say, there's one best way to explain is, dreamless deep sleep. Now, I don't think anyone can remember because it's dreamless and you're sleeping. There's no way you would remember that. But dreamless deep sleep is the best way to explain what does it feel like to be in this bhavanga. And perhaps you may have this momentary daydreaming, right? You almost feel like you're thinking something. You almost feel like you're sleeping, almost feel like you are, in like a kind of a trend, but you don't have any particular recognizable thought occurring in your mind. Now that is similar to what bhavanga chitta means. It means like the dormant state of mind. And our mind is always constantly, arising and passing away in this dormant state. So life continuum chitta is not one, it continues to arise and pass away, arise and pass away. Now, when it is in that state, we experience. Right now, if you look around, you smell something, you see something, you grasp something, you feel something, you hear something, you taste something. Any of them happens. Now, this is like, extra slow movement movie of that experience when you talk about these consciousness here. And here, if you slow down, what happens before we even see? Now, I cannot slow down myself. If I look around, I see my art, my drawings. As soon as I turn, I already know it's an art. It already happened. But Buddha tried to slow down. Wait, let me tell you how that happens. Before you look at a food, before you know it's an apple or banana, there is a few steps that happens in our consciousness to make that registration, knowing that, oh, that is an apple or that is a dog. So before that, it is quite a slow process. So what happens is, as soon as our senses receive some kind of stimulus, a stimuli from the external world, and sometimes it could be ideation, like your mind it has its own memory related to previous experience or imagination. So in any case, we'll stick to the eye consciousness. It applies to all of them. So you see an apple, right? But before you even know an apple is red, it's sweet, you like it, before all that happens, you don't know. It's just like a contact between the object and the sensitive faculty. Your eye have this, we call pasada, the ability to cognize. It's in there, but I cannot cognize itself. The mind should be present. And before we know it's an apple, what happens is, as soon as our senses get impinged by this external stimuli, our mind door will, before that, I think that's the first one is in the category, you see the functional chittas you see in that, out of those 18, the 16th one, 16 consciousness is called Panchadvara Vajjana. So the mind was in this life continuum mode. As soon as it got impinged or received, not even received yet, just like impinge is better term. There's like some kind of impingement happens. This consciousness called Panchadvara Vajjana, 5 sense door adverting consciousness arise. And now I don't need to keep repeating, all of these consciousness has one mind moment. They don't last too long. Its job is to advert our senses to whatever the stimuli is coming from. So whether it is sound or smell or taste or touch, it awakens. Now that means from the life continuum to there is this 5 sense door adverting consciousness. As soon as it adverts, it looks for where it is coming from. And if it is mind, then the next one would be Manodvara Vajjana. That is the adverting of mind door consciousness. But if it is not, then it will lead. Now, if you look at the list, it will lead to seeing something, right? Then that's where Panchadvara Vajjana, then there is Chakku Vijnana. Now, that's how you know it's an object that is cognizable to your eye or ear or nose or tongue. So depending on what type of stimuli is coming, then the next subsequent or corresponding consciousness arises. Now, if it is an object that should be cognizable by our eyes, we call that is eye consciousness arises. So from the life continuum, then there is adverting, right, avajjana, and the next one is either eye, ear, tongue, body, or mind consciousness arises. Now, depending on which one, most of the time, for 4 senses, ear, tongue, nose, and nose, eye, ear, tongue, nose, eye, ear, tongue, nose. 4 of those are always associated with equanimity, because the contact between the sensory stimuli and our sensitive faculty is very subtle, very weak. It is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. That's why it's called equanimous. It's like an in-between, neutral. That's a better term. Neutral consciousness of either eye, ear, nose, or tongue. When it comes to body, it cannot be neutral because you cannot feel like from here. You have to touch. right? You have to make that physical contact. And when you make physical contact, for mind, it is pretty strong. You may not feel it when you try because we are not used to being that sensitive. So without actual contact, there is no physical contact. So if you touch it, and according to Abhidhamma, it says either it will be pleasant or unpleasant. It will never be neutral in terms of body consciousness. So in the category, you see that there is one called pleasant associated bodily consciousness and unpleasant associated bodily consciousness. Both unpleasant one is as a result of unwholesome consciousness, and the pleasant one is as a result of wholesome consciousness. But they cannot produce karma itself because still they are so weak. There's this like awareness, the cognizing your eye sees, knows that there is an object. It's not still, you saw the apple, there is an object. That's what you know so far. So that's the adverting, and there is eye consciousness. Once you have this eye consciousness, you don't know whether the apple is red, blue, green, or yellow because it just received it. It's very rudimentary state. And once you receive it, the next consciousness arises from the category here that we're talking, rootless consciousness, which is we call investigating, right? And I'm sorry, the first one is the receiving. So eye consciousness arises, it just recognizes there is an object, then is the receiving, sampati channa, right? You received, sampati channa means it's received. Hey, there is something for eye to be seen. Now, it's still not clear whether it is good, bad, neutral, like, dislike, is never associated yet. So sampati channa is there. Now, once the sampati channa, receiving consciousness arises, as soon as it dies, its next job is to investigating. Okay, now we're talking about, is this a red apple, blue apple, green apple, white apple? You now investigate. That's the next step of this process of sensual experience. Once it is investigated, then you determine whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. That is called vattapana, right? Determining. I'm sorry, in Pali, it's a santirana. Now, you investigate it. Now, your job is to receive sampati channa, santirana. And next one is vattapana. I was right, vattapana, which is in determining whether it is good, bad, or neutral. Now, after that, what happens is there are 7 consciousness of javana. That's like an energy to produce karma, right? This is where karma is produced. The first javana is weak, and the last javana is also weak. In between those first and the last, these 5 javanas are the place where karma is produced, depending on how you receive, how you investigate it, what you determine. You like it, there is a desire about getting another apple. You dislike it, you have this urge to get rid of it. It's something that reminds you of your hatred reaction to something. It may produce another hatred thought. It is associated with pleasant experience. It may produce another one. So depending on how you determine the experience of that sensual input, will continue to produce 7 steps of this javana. And in between, again, the first and last one are weaker. Just like somebody's starting to run, the very first pace would be a little slower, and the ending pace would be a little slower as well. In between that race, the person is running really fast. That's similar to what we experience in this process of producing karma. And after that, the last step of javana, and then for a few moments, there is a tadarambana. Before we go to next experience, there's another consciousness arises. We stay with this consciousness for a little bit, registration, lingering consciousness. And after that, of course, it goes back to either bhavanga or life continuum, or another process of these same steps. Now, I told you this like a whole process. Now, what is the importance of this? And this is where I like to briefly talk, and I can take some questions for today. Now, if you think of sensory experience, like I said, you look at an apple, there is no way that you can imagine all these steps happened before you throw that apple away, right? You look at the apple, you don't like it, you dump it. You look at an apple, you like it, you take a bite. It seems very spontaneous, very natural, but what Buddha tried to explain to us is it's actually not. Consciousness cannot be on its own functioning. If there is no attention, then you're not talking about human being. There is always, we'll talk about this when we talk about the mental factors, Chetasika, there are 7 universal factors. It's always present in any type of consciousness. Now those are Phassa Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, Jivitindriya, Manasikara, Ekagata. Now that's the contact, feeling, Phassa Vedana, Sanya, perception, Chetana, volition, one-pointedness, life and faculty, Manajivitindriya, and Manasikara, attention. So you cannot have a consciousness absent of these 7 mental factors. That means every mental factor has these universal, that's what they call, Sabbachitta Sadharana in Pali, in English it is universal, because every consciousness is present with these 7 mental factors. So you cannot say that I just threw that apple, I don't know why I did it. Well, you know. What you don't know is that you're aware of this. What you lack is the awareness. Just like somebody is trying to imagine, cut a piece of cheese with a dull knife. Well, you can't blame the knife, because the purpose of knife is to cut the cheese, but your knife is dull. That's why it's not cutting. Just like that, the experience could be fully aware of, but the problem is the object that we are, or the tool we are using, which is our mind, to see that is dull. That means our mind is not so aware of the experience. We cannot tell whether it is happening by awareness or not, because we are so used to doing things in automatic mode. So given that, when you are aware, when you meditate, now in meditation, there's an application. Why would Buddha even bother to talk about enlightenment if we cannot change this? Why bother talking about enlightenment? Because we should be all slave of our karma, because we are constantly, every moment, every day, we are producing thousands and thousands of karma. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Now, all of those karma has potential to give you some results. That means we're doomed. For the lifelong, we will be producing karma and getting the result of karma. Where is the exit? There's no way to get out of this process. Well, that's not the case, because every sense experience is not going to produce the result of your experience. It is your choice. Now, that's where I want to highlight here the receiving, sampadichana, santiran, the investigating. How do you investigate, and what do you determine will tell you whether it is good, bad, or neutral experience. And that's how you produce karma. In meditation, that's what we try to do. Now, if you think of meditating for 5 minutes, what you're trying to do is not to get to the point of javana, the 7 steps of karma producing consciousness, that you would create more of the similar or worse karma. You're trying to ditte. You see, remember the process of this? I use the apple, eye consciousness arise. You just make aware of yourself. I just saw an apple. We try not to go any further, liking, disliking, hating, wanting, craving, attaching to this object again. That's where you stop producing more karma. That's why I think this part of Abhidhamma is very important, that we talk about it, we learn about it, and try to apply when we practice loving kindness, when we practice meditation, and even when we practice simple reflection, like generosity or practicing morality, that you do that with that awareness. I don't want to ask for more by giving little. That is, again, you're now rooting your action with some kind of desire. So we'll talk more about other remaining consciousness. I think that's for today's plan and the talk. I really appreciate your joining, and if you have any question, I'll take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharajan. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I guess my question is, how do we apply this into our practice, right? Because it's so cerebral and it's kind of difficult, at least for me, or maybe it's for Westerner, to like fully understand these concepts. Like I've been reading both texts, the conversational one between the monk and the king, and then I've been reading the more encyclopedic one. And then hearing all this, it's like I understand why you're talking to some degree, and then I don't know that I will retain all this and like how it'll affect my filter or my practice, you know?
Thank you for the question, John. I agree with you. It's again, I think I like to tell the same analogy. We find it overwhelming and so hard to understand because our mind is not trained for this yet.
Mm-hmm.
One simple training would be like developing that one-pointedness, like concentration meditation.
Mm-hmm.
As people, as meditators, whether they are monk or non-monk, as they become better at training their mind to stay one-pointed in an object and have that some expertise or proficiency in keeping your mind in one object makes it easier. Now, I'm not telling that you will be aware of all these steps. You can. That's at least from what I know from Abhidhamma teaching. You will be not at the level that Buddha was. No one. That's like there's a belief that Buddha has the most profound understanding about the analysis of this consciousness and the remaining. But what we can be at least aware of is like, how do we redirect our automatic reaction to or automatic process of our thought to more intentional process. I think that's what I take away. If I have choice to think, anytime I see an object, I can still stop from liking and disliking and producing more karma, especially in meditation state, right? If you're meditating, sitting down and trying to practice, and you have a thought and you've taken away by, drifted away by that one single thought, well, you miss two things. One, you miss the practice. Two, you end up producing more either wholesome or unwholesome, most likely unwholesome karma. Right? So in that process, what I can be aware of, at least the application of this, what I just talked today, is like, hey, every time I think, there's a chance that I'm going to produce some unwholesome karma. And the simple message in suttas that Buddha gave was like, Ditte Dittamattang, Sutte Suttamattang. Vinyate Vinyatamattang. When you hear something, try to stop at that state, like hearing. Think of the meditating, what we tell ourselves, breathing in, breathing out. We're not going to tell like breathing is so good, oh my gosh, I want to breathe so much. Breathing out is so annoying. No, we try to keep it to just the experience itself. That's what the message in the suttas. He says, seeing a scene should be perceived as just seeing a scene. There is no good scene, no bad scene, no neutral. We just try to. That's what I think where this comes really handy. Don't take it to the point it produced that Javanati does. Don't take it to the point it produced more karma. We stop at receiving, and we stop at right there. We received it and we cognize it as like seeing. We stop.
Yeah.
And it cannot go any further. And same thing with the other sensory experience. So to me, the application would be like, how can I stop like from generating so many thoughts with one simple experience, and especially in meditation. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. It's quite a bit of experience, but we don't go analyzing all that, associating with good and bad with that incoming and outgoing breath. And we will talk a little more when you talk about the mental factors that really put into context how these process of cognitive process, so that's what we call in practice. So if you bear with me, and that's really good. I'm so happy that you're reading. And when you talk about mental factors, you will see more connection, because we cannot talk about consciousness alone without talking about mental factors. They are never separated. They always come together. They always arise together, stay together and disappear together. That's the nature of consciousness and mental factors. So what we will right now, what you're talking is just mental factors. That's why it's little like incomplete. When we get to mental factors, we'll connect them. You might have little, oh, I see, they connect, because mental factor is like your experience part that will all come together.
And earlier today, you were talking about how the sense of the body, it's either aversion or attached, like it's either pleasant or
unpleasant. Yes.
But there's also neutral, right? Like when you're standing on the ground, you don't even notice.
Now, Abhidhamma doesn't categorize bodily consciousness as neutral. Now, that, again, this is just a categorizing of a rootless. Now, it's the analogy, if you remember reading the book, when you hammer a piece of cotton, that's the body, and the external stimulus is the hammer. It's on another metal plate. You cannot just hammer the cotton. It will make a strong impingement. So from that perspective, the bodily consciousness is always either rooted on pleasant or unpleasant. However, that does not mean it will produce another karma, because it's so weak. That's why it's rootless. It's talking about the experience is always either pleasant or unpleasant, but not strong enough to produce another karma.
Okay. So when you're standing on the ground and you're not paying attention to it,
now standing on the ground, think of that. Your contact between the floor and your feet.
Yeah.
There should be, like, if you're floating, now you can't say you're standing. When you're standing, the body weight, my understanding, is pretty significant to produce some either positive or negative, it's pleasant or unpleasant consciousness. Okay. Versus the eye, you don't bring eye object into your eye, you just see. That is, it's that subtle to be neutral.
Okay. And then the last question is, what page should we read to for the next meeting? Like, because is it chapters or is it just
next? Let's talk about the fine matter and matter. I'm sorry, material and fine material. Yeah, and I will save the last one, the enlightenment consciousness, for a different day, because that one is interesting for us. I'm sure all of them are, but let's stick to those two subtopics.
Okay. Thank
you, John. Thank you for joining and keeping up with the readings.
Thank you. Thank you for teaching.
Thank you. I'm always happy.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Then we will chant pages 4 and 10. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'll see you in a month.
Next month.
Sounds good. Have a good day at weekend.
You too. Pages 4 and 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. We Thank you, everyone. Next week, there is the marathon. So getting here may be difficult for some, but the temple is open. We'd love to see you. Being all together is a great benefit. It's, I think, better than Zooming, if at all
Indeed.
possible. But thank you for coming. And
Subodha.
Subodha will be will give the Dharma talk next week, which is always interesting. So please either tune in or appear. There's tea and cookies after the service, and that may be an incentive to come. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.